Hi, it's James Murray here from City Hall, where I'm Sadiq Khan's Deputy Mayor for Housing. But before I was in this job, I was a local councillor in Islington, and right in the middle of the ward that I represented was Barnsbury Housing Association. And I know you're not allowed to have favourites, but it was definitely one that I had a huge soft spot for when I was working there. In a place like Islington, it's particularly acute in the way it is in London, that areas have become far more expensive in recent years, and protecting affordable housing is even more vital than it's ever been. And that's why organisations like Barnsbury Housing Association, 50 years old now, play such an important role in the local community. And all it really remains for me to say is, here's the next 50 years.
Home is where I'm warm, comfortable, and have good friends nearby.
Home for me is a quiet spot where I can get inspired.
Home is where you can take your makeup off, put your feet up, get in your pyjamas and no one has to see you.
Well, home to me is my family and somewhere I can watch my cricket.
If it was a person, I'd sort of say it was friendly.
I think we've been an asset to the borough and probably an example to the people that run the borough.
It is a small village, and people say you don't have that in London and big places like that. Well, you do around here in Islington.
Barnsbury is one of the loveliest areas of London. You know, we've got lovely green squares, lovely housing, and you know the quality of our homes and our stock generally, our estate and our homes is really nice.
Islington's a hugely expensive area for housing, and large numbers of people could never afford to live in the borough if they were dependent on buying or renting in the private market.
The change has been amazing in Islington over the last 50 years. You could go to some places and the change would be that everything that was there before has been demolished and rebuilt. And a lot of new stuff has been built in Islington, but really it's the change that's taken place in the housing that was there in the first place. It's become so difficult for ordinary people, and I'm not talking about poor people, I'm talking about people on ordinary incomes or even quite high incomes to be able to afford to live in Islington. We need ordinary housing that ordinary people can afford to live in, and we need to make sure that when that happens it's not relegated to some sort of welfare housing, that these are homes that people can be proud of, communities that they want to live in. And that's what I think Barnsbury offers, and that's exactly what the council wants. And if we could have many more like Barnsbury in working right across the borough, I'm sure that would make a fantastic impact.
Lots of housing associations are celebrating their 50th birthdays because that's when a lot of housing associations were set up.
There was a film, Ken Loach film, called Cathy Come Home. At the time there were a huge amount of people who were just horrified with what that said about the state of housing. Islington had some really poor quality housing at the time, and people were thinking, what can we do to help? Barnsbury's founders were local architects, local surveyors who thought we can do something to make a difference.
We started out by saving a block of street properties in Islington, which at the time were falling apart and they couldn't sell them, but now would be worth millions if they weren't part of a housing association.
The properties on Barnsbury Street were some of the first ones that we bought, and we bought them in really poor condition.
We've got a mix of traditional properties, very much in the Islington mould, and new build.
One of the things that makes us unique is that we're able to work on a very local scale. We've worked in partnership with the council on small schemes such as Eden Grove and Belitha Villas, which other landlords perhaps wouldn't consider.
These are the kinds of places that 30 odd years ago would have been very run down. Now incredibly high value properties, and they're able to make use of them and make sure that they're still available to ordinary people with ordinary jobs and ordinary incomes in that locality, in a way that we've not been able to do as a council in some instances, and the other large housing associations have not been able to do either.
For many of our tenants, Barnsbury's been their life. We've got people who've lived on the estate since it first opened, and that's great.
I've lived in Barnsbury Housing for 43/44 years, and I've been in this property for 37 years. This house was built in the 1830s and it still has a lot of its original features. When I first got the place, I was 23, I was pregnant, homeless, a teacher. I worked in Islington and my ex-husband was a social worker, so we completely fitted into the remit for Barnsbury Housing, which was key workers. It's been a labour of love. It's taken me a long time to get it into the way that I like it, which is very plain, but with the good features of the property. There's a garden where I can walk out and enjoy the flowers. It's worth making the property that even is rented in a public sector your own, not just it's rented and it doesn't matter. It does matter, it's your life.
50 years ago, it was very unusual to find properties that were adapted, but these days we work very closely with Islington Council to adapt properties to meet people's changing needs.
One of the things that I want to see is for it to become easier and more usual for people with disabilities, however severe and complex those disabilities are, to live in the community. And that means that we need to have a higher proportion of our accommodation, our general needs accommodation needs to be fit for people with disabilities so that they can continue to live there. And I think that housing associations have often led the way in that, and Barnsbury is a good example of that.
We've also got a sheltered scheme, Highbury View, where we provide support for older residents.
It took Islington Council to find me somewhere here. The previous occupant wasn't disabled as I was, hence they adapted the kitchen, the bedroom. They provided the ceiling hoist, and I'm very pleased with the accommodation, the premises, the people. I still attend meetings, I attend all the activities, everything. So I like this place anyway. And I hope Barnsbury will continue to make us happy.
I first came here in 1984. I did 6 years in the police in the 50s. And since then, I'd done various other jobs. But eventually I started writing, which is something I'd always wanted to do. And my first book was about my experiences as a policewoman. I put our name down for the council properties, and eventually someone, Jeff, who was the manager of Barnsbury Housing Association, came to see us.
Jeff Lewis is, in a sense, Mr. Barnsbury. He was involved from the very early stages. He became general manager. He probably knew every single resident on the estate, and the legacy's still there for everyone to see.
Jeff's kind of stamp is all over the organisation. I think some of he still comes up in conversation when we're talking to residents or some of the staff who worked with him.
The first tenants moved in 1970 in Barnsbury Street, and the main estate was occupied from 74, 75. And it was, quite wonderful because you had so many new people moving into the same place at the same time.
We were a very small community at that time. In fact, the first flat I had was used as the office for the caretakers because my flat had the only phone on the estate. So if anybody needed to pass messages to the caretakers, contractors or anybody, they called my phone.
And I think the caretakers are the kind of cornerstone of our service in terms of how they're so responsive. All of our residents know our caretakers.
A good example of the continuity and the length of time people have associated with us is Ron Lord and Richard Bull, who were for many years the maintenance and caretaker team. Richard celebrated 40 years working with us, and Ron, who retired a while ago, continued to be involved as a board member for many years and is now actively involved with the Tenants Association.
I was just looking at the size of them trees. I remember us putting them in about 30 years ago.
Oh, what was that, Dick? 1980, 82?
Oh, yeah, must have been
when we done those.
The size of the hole we dug to put them in.
Yeah,
incredible.
Absolutely. It's nice to see them doing well. Well, I first came here in 75. I moved into Gisling Walk originally, 3-bedroom unit, from my choice. And a man called Alan Slater actually introduced me to it. He was our treasurer then at the time. He asked me if I'd like to work for him. So I said, yes, give me 3 months, and if I like it, I'll stay. If you don't like me, I can go. But I liked it, and I stayed. And, well, I'm not sorry about it, because I enjoyed every day, especially working with Richard when he came along a bit later. We made a good couple, and...
Not married couple?
No.
Moving in here was the difference between living in the Hilton, Park Lane, to a bed and breakfast in Blackpool, you know what I mean? It moving in here was unbelievable. It was fantastic. It was modern, nice neighbours, it was good.
What was special about Barnsbury is that you don't have remote management. In the early days, the treasurer of Barnsbury Housing, Alan Slater, was really involved. He was at all the tenants' meetings, even when they were quite difficult at times at the beginning. And he used to do loads of the interviews. He was really, really involved. I think I knew everybody by their first name. It's just not the same as some of these big associations nowadays, where just the landlord. We were community builders, still are.
There's no community like the Barnsbury community. Even down to like the little man that works in the off licence there, Des, everyone knows him. I just feel really safe here.
We run coffee mornings for older people who might be a bit isolated. It's a great place for people to kind of meet, talk to each other.
I found it's important to be part of a community, and BHA have been very good with that. You know, with the Good Tenants Association, and holding various events for us to get together and to know each other better, and to go on trips, to the coast or to shows and that sort of thing.
We also used to have firework nights as well. I mean, we had some brilliant firework displays.
Wouldn't be allowed for health and safety reasons now, but totally brought the whole community together. And with Jeff, with his barbecue, Jeff always did a very good barbecue.
I used to always cook the burgers. There were thousands of pictures of me cooking millions of burgers. And I think these fun days are very good community days.
And we used to have coconut shires and things in the garage.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. I mean, those things have died out of
throw
it
eggs
now.
at me.
Yeah, that's right. We had, didn't we?
Not wet sponges, eggs.
Eggs. We used to throw eggs at each other. Things like. It was great fun.
I was very involved with the Housing Association, started the magazine, News of the Muse, which I hand wrote and printed.
In a non-digital age, we were producing a monthly newsletter, and if it didn't arrive on that day in a month's time, people would, well, where's my magazine, the News of the Muse?
And now, of course, it's looking really flashy and wonderful, but it wasn't to start with.
It keeps you informed of things that you need to know, new rules and new building and all sorts of things.
Being on the Tenants Association, we realised that social media is the way forward now. Dean, who works at BHA, offered to help and created the page for me, and now all I have to do is go on there and update certain things. So it's amazing that the BHA can offer help with that.
We'd like to welcome you all to the 50th anniversary of the Barnsbury Housing Association, guys. Let's have a nice big round of applause.
We're not going to keep you long for speeches. We declare this open. Thank you.
I think I've gone most years throughout my life. It's very family orientated, which is amazing, and it's all free.
There'll be time enough for counting. When the deal is done, you've got nowhere to hold 'em.
We have a huge number of residents who come along to it, and that's the sort of centrepiece really of the work, the community work that we do. It's great to have the opportunity to celebrate the fact that housing is so important to people's lives. It's having a secure and affordable, genuinely affordable home. That makes a huge difference to people's lives. One of the key priorities is around how we can use our strength and our skills as an organisation to provide more housing.
We're looking at a number of options on that, some of them off the estate, some of them making full use of the space that we've got on the estate.
We've got 40 homes that we're just about to take over at Highbury View, a beautiful sheltered scheme up on Highbury Fields. We're taking that over from another landlord. And we've also got 4 homes being built on a site at Eden Grove, a site that we've owned for many, many years.
I think all social landlords, we can all do a lot more to provide more housing for people who need it. I think we can be an awful lot more imaginative about looking for the opportunities on the land that we own already. I think we can be a lot more imaginative about buddying up with other developers, whether they're private developers, to make sure that we get a share of that and that we can step in and help them to manage some of that affordable housing that we demand from them. And I think we can do a lot more to make more efficient use of the stock we already have. For example, by helping older people who might be under-occupying because their children have left home, supporting them to move to a more comfortable one-bedroom flat and helping them with that, so that we've then got family dwellings to let to somebody else who needs them.
This is a gradual process. We're never going to be an association that suddenly builds 50 or 60 new homes. We may acquire some, like we have with Highbury View. We've got objectives which involve trying to provide more homes for people who need them in this high-cost area of the country.
I'm preaching, while creeping. Let's go to touch the green, green grass of home. The old house is still standing, though the paint is cracked and dry.
I hope that everyone here, even the kids, will be housed here, and it will continue to be generation under generation living here. Because we've all stayed here and grown up, seen each other's parents, seen each other's siblings, and I'd love to keep that here for another 50 years when I'm an old lady and someone's grandkids come up to me and say, do you remember this, do you remember that?
I think Barnsbury Housing Association should go on, and it'll be here in another 50 years, I hope.